"You're not my mom. You'll never be my mom. I wish you'd just leave." The words came from an 8-year-old girl who would change everything Susan thought she knew about love. But 2 years later, that same child would hand Susan a card on Mother's Day that would shatter her heart and rebuild it in the same moment. What Lucy taught Susan about family, grief, and love left her in tears. And this story of heartwarming stories and hopeful journeys will change how you see blended families forever. If you love real-life stories about second chances and what family truly means, hit subscribe right now, because you won't want to miss what happens next. Susan had always been fiercely independent. At 32, she'd built a successful career as a graphic designer, and honestly believed she'd never want children. Motherhood terrified her in ways she couldn't articulate. Then she accidentally grabbed someone else's coffee at a cafe and looked up into the warmest brown eyes she'd ever seen. Mark was different, grounded, thoughtful, with a quiet strength that made Susan feel safe. But on their third date, he stopped walking and told her something that changed everything. He had an 8-year-old daughter named Lucy, and he was a widower. His wife had died in a car accident 3 years ago. If Susan wanted to continue, Lucy came first, always. Susan's heart hammered. A child, an 8-year-old who'd lost her mother. Still, something in Mark's vulnerability made her whisper yes. Over 6 months, their relationship deepened into something neither expected. And slowly, terrifyingly, Susan fell in love with this man and the life he represented, even if it scared her senseless. The first time Susan met Lucy, she thought she might be sick from nervousness. Mark invited her to dinner at his home, a cozy house filled with photographs of a family that once was. But the moment Susan walked through that door, she knew this wouldn't be easy. Lucy was devastatingly polite, calling Susan Miss Susan in a carefully neutral voice. When Susan presented art supplies she'd brought, Lucy thanked her with courtesy that felt like a wall, then set them aside. Throughout dinner, Susan tried everything, asking about school, complimenting drawings, attempting jokes. Lucy answered in monosyllables, her eyes flickering to a framed photo of a woman with a radiant smile. Mark's late wife, the ghost that filled every corner of that room. That night, Susan whispered to Mark, "Maybe I'm not cut out for this." He pulled her close. "She's scared, we all are." A year later, when Mark proposed and Susan moved in, she thought love would be enough. But Lucy remained distant, unreachable, living behind walls Susan couldn't scale. Every morning Susan made Lucy's favorite breakfast. Every afternoon she attended school events from the back row. Every night she left encouraging notes that were never acknowledged. The comparisons were constant and cutting. "My real mom used to do it this way," Lucy would say. "My real mom was better at helping with homework." Each statement was a small knife. Late at night, Susan stared at photos of Mark's late wife. This woman who'd been everything Susan felt she wasn't. She was competing with a saint, with a memory that grew more perfect each day. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. Lucy had a math assignment due, and she was struggling. Mark was working late, so Susan offered to help. For 30 painful minutes, Susan tried to explain fractions while Lucy grew increasingly frustrated. Then Lucy slammed her pencil down, eyes blazing with tears and fury. "You're doing it wrong. My real mom would know how to help me." The words tumbled out like poison. "You're not my mom. You'll never be my mom. I wish you'd never come here. I wish you'd just leave." Susan fled to the bathroom and locked the door, sobbing. She'd tried so hard. And for what? In that moment, she seriously considered leaving this impossible situation. But then Susan heard something through the door that stopped her cold. Lucy was crying in her bedroom, deep, wrenching sobs. Between the sobs, Susan heard Lucy's muffled voice. "I'm sorry, Mommy. I didn't mean to like her drawings. I didn't mean to laugh at her jokes. I'm not forgetting you, I promise. Please don't be mad at me." Everything clicked. Lucy wasn't rejecting Susan because she hated her. She was rejecting her because loving Susan felt like betraying her mother. This child had been carrying guilt for 3 years, terrified that any affection for Susan was erasing her mother's memory. When Mark came home, he sat on the hallway floor between both doors, head in his hands. "I don't know how to fix this." Susan emerged, her face blotchy but her resolve hardening. Maybe we don't fix it. Maybe we just learn to hurt together until it hurts a little less. The next morning, Susan tried something different. She stopped trying to be Lucy's mother. She stopped trying to replace the woman in the photographs. She just started being herself. No forced conversation, no pressure, no trying too hard. Just existing naturally in the same space. The change wasn't dramatic. Small shifts accumulated over weeks. One evening, Lucy wandered into the kitchen where Susan was sketching and asked what she was drawing. Susan showed her without making it a big deal. Lucy asked if Susan could teach her that technique. They spent an hour together, just drawing, talking about art instead of anything heavy. It was their first real conversation. Slowly, Lucy began opening up. She started talking about her mother, not as a weapon, but as memories she needed to share. Susan listened without trying to insert herself into those memories. She just honored that Lucy trusted her enough to share these sacred pieces of her heart. 8 months after that terrible fight, Lucy stopped calling her Miss Susan and started just saying Susan. It seemed small, but to Susan it meant everything. It meant Lucy saw her as a person, not a threat. And when they both burst out laughing one afternoon over a ridiculous drawing, Susan felt something shift permanently. This was what hopeful journeys looked like. Messy, slow, but ultimately moving towards something real. 2 years after their first meeting, everything came to a head on Mother's Day. Susan had planned to stay in the background, knowing it was Lucy's day to honor her mother. She expected nothing, wanted nothing. But that morning, Susan woke to a gentle knock. Lucy pushed the door open, carrying a tray with slightly burnt toast, runny eggs, and orange juice in a fancy glass. "I made you breakfast," she said quietly. "I know you're not my mom, but I wanted to." Susan's throat closed up. Then Lucy pulled something from behind her back, a handmade card. Lucy sat on the bed, hands shaking as she opened it. The card was divided into 2 sections. On the left, a portrait of her mother with words, "Thank you for loving Dad and teaching him how to love. Thank you for making me. I miss you every day." On the right, a drawing of Susan and Lucy holding hands. "Thank you for showing me that love doesn't run out. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for teaching me how to live again." Lucy's voice was barely a whisper. "My mom gave me life. She'll always be my mom, and I'll always love her. But you," Lucy looked up, eyes swimming with tears, "you taught me that my heart is big enough for both of you. You taught me that loving you doesn't mean forgetting her. You taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who stays, who shows up, who chooses you even when it's hard." Susan completely broke down. She pulled Lucy into her arms and sobbed. Because in that moment, Susan realized something that shattered her. She'd spent 2 years thinking she was teaching Lucy about love, but Lucy had been the teacher all along. This 10-year-old child had taught Susan that love isn't about replacement. It's about addition. Lucy taught her that grief and joy walk hand in hand through life. That family isn't defined by biology, but by choice and showing up day after day. That children are infinitely more resilient and wise than adults realize. That being a parent isn't about perfection. It's about presence. Now, 5 years later, Lucy is 15, and their bond is unshakable. Lucy still honors her mother's memory, and Susan encourages this. Susan and Mark had a son together, and watching Lucy be an incredible big sister has taught Susan even more about love's expansive nature. Last week, Susan overheard Lucy defending her to a friend who called Susan just a stepmom. Lucy's response was fierce. "She's not just anything, she's Susan, and she chose us every single day when she could have walked away. Don't you dare diminish what that means." The story of Susan and Lucy isn't about a woman who saved a grieving child. It's about 2 people who saved each other. Lucy didn't make Susan a mother. She made her something better. Brave, patient, humble, and infinitely more capable of love than Susan ever thought possible. For anyone struggling with blended families or step-parenting, Susan wants you to know, stop trying to fill someone else's shoes. Stand beside them instead. Don't replace what was lost. Add to what remains. Be patient. Show up even when it feels pointless. And be willing to learn from the children you're trying to teach, because they understand love and resilience better than we adults realize. Family isn't about genetics or perfect circumstances. It's about choosing each other, again and again, through fights and failures. It's about creating space for grief and joy to coexist. It's about proving that love doesn't run out when you share it. It multiplies. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video, subscribe for more heartwarming stories and real-life stories about hopeful journeys, and comment about your own experiences with blended families. Your story matters. Remember, the bravest thing you can do is let someone in. For Lucy, who taught Susan that the heart's capacity for love is infinite. And for every step-parent struggling, you're not just anything. You're everything to someone who chose to let you in.